Hello, my single solitary viewer, and welcome to the Combat Update Minecraft PvP School. That's right, school is in session, and our teacher today is actually Andyboyonalert, one of the most effective PvPers in the combat updates. And I'm not making that up. It's all true. He is a lethal opponent, but today he's going to be taking a lot of damage.
I try my best.
So we're going to try to give you some tips to improve your combat update PvP. So that's Minecraft 1.9 to 1.12 inclusively. It's also going to be still mostly be applicable in the aquatic updates and the upcoming 1.14 Minecraft, but the water mechanics, of course, are going to be different, and we're not covering tridents and so on. The first thing we're going to cover, though, is actually if you open your options and you go to your settings. I'm using LabbyMod, so you might not you might not find the things at the same place, but we're going to talk about sensitivity, and you'll need to adjust your sensitivity to a setting that is most comfortable for you.
Best way to go about that is if you're at a sensitivity where you're not completely sure if it's right for you, just always start by lowering it a little bit at a time, testing it out. If it doesn't feel right, then raise it, and every single time it eventually doesn't feel right, just try to go between those two, like raising it up and down until you find something you're mostly comfortable with. This will help you find like the best middle ground too, not too fast, not too slow. Typically you want to start on lower sensitivity just because with bow it makes it easier for aiming. You would use, like, this is what pros do in Overwatch and CSGO and all those like those games where you have to aim, the shooter games, is they start on a lower sensitivity, keep raising it until they find something they like.
The other tip, the other half of that is actually going to be in the is it in the video settings?
It should be right on options.
Yeah, it's right in the options. Yeah. We're talking about the field of vision, FOV. Usually by default, the FOV is at normal, which gives you a nice flat perspective. But unfortunately, there are some disadvantages with using that, especially when it comes to PvE and PvP.
For videos, obviously, you want it around like the 70-90 range because it makes the video look nicer in Minecraft. But typically, if you want to do better in combat, you want to be able to see your peripherals a bit better. It makes you so you don't have to turn your head as much. You don't have to be moving your mouse as much. You can see people coming from the side if you have it on something like Quake Pro, but obviously that doesn't look nice and it takes some time to adjust to. So if you play on 70, which is normal, just raise it by 5 or 10 every so often until you get to a point where it starts giving you a headache, and then start lowering it again until you find something you like. I play on 100. For people that typically play on normal, I would recommend putting it like in the 80-90 range just to test it out. 95 is probably what 95 to 105 is what I find most people play on. I know a lot of people
most UHCers and most PvPers, yeah.
A lot of
most YouTubers are going to be probably roughly stopping at 85, like myself.
Yeah.
But that gives any as high as you can take it. You'll get the peripheral vision where you can see more of the battlefield is good for you.
And I mean, if you're not a person who uploads and like shares their content, and you can handle Quake Pro, it will genuinely benefit you to have those peripherals. It might take a long time to adjust to, but it makes it so you can see more on your screen, so you'll see something that some people might not.
All right, let's get to the cutting and stabbing. I've had an axe in my hand for a little while, but perhaps we should talk about swords first.
So the thing with swords is they can be blocked by shields really easily. If I swing at Flouze while he's holding a shield, he won't take any damage. The benefit to it is it has a high attack speed.
Yeah.
An axe takes some time to recharge, whereas a sword comes up pretty much instantly. So if you're fighting someone who's also using a sword, you can kind of bait out by swapping your shield, and every so often they'll have their shield down, you'll have their shield down, and it will be kind of like a standoffish kind of thing, but eventually someone's going to die if you do it that way.
Yeah, at this pace, that's going to be me.
Yeah. It really just takes practice knowing like your click speed. Typically, you just always hold down your right click, you let go, you left click.
What's important to mention, by the way, if you're someone who actually comes from playing Hypixel UHCs or other UHCs that are done in 1.8 or 1.7, and you're used to doing a lot of click spamming to do the fighting, that's not going to work in the combat update. You can see there's a little reticle on speed, and it's the recharge, and you need to wait until the weapon recharges until you can get a full hit on.
And that isn't naturally on your screen as well. You have to go, I believe it's in your video settings to actually apply that. And when you first load up the game, it's not going to be on. It's just in options video settings to turn it on. It's called an attack indicator. Yep. And if I can show the difference as well if you want to watch Flouze's health. This is me.
I use the crosshair, but you might want to use the hotbar if you prefer.
Yeah, and then this is spam clicking.
He barely does any damage.
It takes me about 3 or 4 hits to do a full heart, whereas if I don't spam click, I do a full heart just in one swing.
The main advantage of the sword, by the way, is that the swords are cheap in terms of enchantment. You can make iron swords, and it's very easy to get sharpness 1, sharpness on the sword, and you can anvil those, and it's very cheap to make a decent weapon with a sword. Like a sharpness 3 iron sword is very quickly made, and you don't need books, you don't need anything special. All you need is iron, sticks, and enchantment levels to combine the whole thing together. And you might get enchantments like Fire Aspect, notably. So you'll want those.
And yeah, we'll talk about Fire Aspect later as well.
Yeah, we will. However, there's what we think is a superior weapon to swords. If you have to pick only one between the sword and the axe, Andy and I both agree the axe is the one to pick.
The main benefit to the axe is that you can get a shield bash on it, which stuns a player's shield for some amount of time. The reason this is so powerful is that if you're fighting someone who's not using an axe, you can bash their shield, and then you can do that shield melee swap thing that we were talking about or that we were displaying earlier, and they can't do anything to you. It's very unlikely that they're going to land more hits than you if they don't have their shield up. If they're just using a sword, that is. This leaves you relatively open to secondary weapon attacks, which we'll talk about later. But the main thing you should be concerned about is your shield going down, because that's your main defense in one of these games.
It sure is.
And an axe is exactly what you do to take that shield down.
Yeah, and you see us using sharpness 3 diamond axe here, but you can do this even if you have just your regular iron axe, and it's not even enchanted because you didn't have any books. You can bash the shield and then switch to the sword.
Yeah, so you don't even need to spend diamonds on an axe. You can even use a stone axe, and it does the exact same thing. It doesn't even matter. The difference between a stone axe and a diamond axe is just the attack speed. And it doesn't matter how quickly it recharges because you don't have your shield up. The second it is in your hand, you can use it to bash a shield.
Exactly. So, for example, shield up, shield up.
Yep.
There you go. So I can bash the shield and then switch to the sword and get some hits on. And so that way, I only have the sword that's enchanted, but I managed to defeat the shield with the axe that maybe was not enchanted. And that's you can defeat an opponent in melee that way, or at least do a lot of damage.
Overall, the axe does do more damage. Like I believe an unenchanted stone axe does the same damage as a sharpness 2 diamond sword. Now the attack speed is obviously different, but if you're a very conservative player, it'll benefit you more. If you're kind of like you want to get those sick combos in with your sword, then you can still kind of do that with a sword. But with an axe, if you play conservatively, you will typically always outdamage your opponents if they're using a sword.
Next item to talk about, it's the bow.
Right, so with the bow, it's a little bit more than just get good, but that's kind of the basis to it, is aiming your shots, hitting your shots. That's the main thing. But there's little things that can benefit you in a bow fight, like positioning. Would you rather me stand over here because you get easy shots on me, or stand over here? Half my body, if I'm just standing here, like your full body's exposed, half my body isn't. So you have a much smaller target than me if I stand over here as opposed to standing over here. That's pretty much all there really is to do with positioning having yourself being a smaller hitbox makes it so you'll get hit less. It's as easy as that.
And the number one thing you have to remember when you move from other Minecraft versions to the combat update, you can't use the shield while the bow is in your hand. So if you want to shield against someone who's using a bow, you have to remove the bow from your own hand. Or if you want to take shots, you're also exposing yourself at the same time.
Right.
So
if
it all
you're
becomes...
taking a shot, you can get shot, and vice versa with your opponents.
Mm-hmm.
Kind of turns into a who shields more, who shoots more situation.
Yeah. When it comes to improving with the bow, as I'm sad to tell you, it's probably going to be practice. And I don't mean practice shooting cows and skeletons and zombies, but it's going to have to be practice shooting players, because you have to learn how humans, what they tend to do. And with the bow, the art of it is actually to predict where your opponent is going to go and shoot there. So that's why you can't really practice using stationary targets or, inoffensive little mobs like the cows that I missed.
You tried your best, bud.
Yeah, I tried. It was a long shot, kind of, in my defense. But yes, you have to practice, and you have to practice against other humans. Because humans have strafes.
Yeah, and there's other little things with bows, like having in a UHC, you can expect the game to go for a little while. Shields, honestly, they're easy to craft for how much they can benefit you in a game. So always try to have 1 or 2 extra shields, especially if you're expecting to have long bow fights over mountains or anything like that. You're gonna want to have an extra one, because if that thing breaks, your defenses are lowered until you can craft another one, and that puts you at a huge disadvantage.
Indeed.
And one last thing with a bow is, if you want to shield for me, Flouze.
I shall.
If you're lucky enough to find a dungeon or something that has a flame book, the fire pierces through the shield. So if you can get your hands on a flame book in a UHC or in any PvP situation, you can burn your target, and then once they're putting that water out, if you're close enough, that's from some free hits. Or you could just shoot them more, because what's more annoying than getting bow spammed by a flame bow?
Nothing. Nothing is more annoying than getting shot by a flame bow.
And I would love to give you some defense strategies against this, but I'm going to be honest with you. I don't have any.
No, there are none.
Don't take that fight. It's not worth it. Wait for them to get almost dead, and then you kill them.
Yeah. As the players of the Season 2 of Chopping Block found out, there is very little defense you can have against a flame bow.
Honestly, the best of the best probably would still have a tough time against one. Even against the Flouze maker. Sorry, bud.
Oh. But what you can do, I suppose, is also practice your strafes and practice your mobility, because between melee and range fighting with the bow, there's actually moving around, and moving around doesn't seem immediately relevant to PvP, but actually being good at moving around is going to be quite an advantage. And most of the best PvPers are actually some of the best, parkour players, and who are really good at running around and basically choosing the position they want on the battlefield. If you're able to if you're better at moving around than your opponent is, then you're the one who's going to be able to dictate the terms of the fight. And you're going to be the one to be able to take control and decide how the fight happens. Is it going to be melee? Your choice. Is it going to be bow? Your choice. Because you have that advantage.
And typically in any version of the game, when it comes to combat, the winner is a lot of the time, the winner is whoever chooses how the fight goes. And when you're choosing the fight, you kind of want to do the opposite of what your opponent wants to do. So if your opponent wants to have a bow fight, that's probably because they're better at bow, or they have a better bow, or their armor is projectile protection and is better with bow. And so if you get in a position where you can melee them, you might be in the advantage. And if someone wants to melee you, that means that they're probably in the disadvantage in a bow fight. And being able to get in a position using any mobility strategies to do either of those things will benefit you when it comes to those specific situations. When it comes to just running through terrain, you just gotta know when to hit your spacebar as opposed to holding your sprint W and spacebar, forward spacebar, and sprint keys. You gotta know when to jump. You gotta know, like going through a forest, if you spam your jump key when you're going under a too tall tree, you'll gain speed. You'll be faster than someone.
Yep.
Just normally sprinting or sprint jumping. Things like that. Going on knowing when to go on top of the trees or running under them. All those little things, having those mindsets as to how you're gonna go through the terrain. It takes. It's like shooting a bow. It takes practice, and there's not a lot of tips you can give for it. Just know exactly. Just go through certain terrains, knowing like things like seeing puddles or using F5 to know what's ahead of you. How many times have you seen a funny clip of someone falling into a ravine? They probably weren't in F5.
Yeah, that's true. Also, speaking of mobility, if you're able to, for example, parkour your way, if you will, over a pond, and your opponent is not, that can also help you decide how to, take control of a fight, which you can also do, by the way, with lily pads.
Yeah, I was going to say, if you find like a larger lake that's too deep, this is not too deep, but this is for the sake of the example, you can place them right on the water and use them as the same as blocks, and you'll even go over too deep areas.
Exactly.
If someone doesn't have lily pads and they try to get over a river or something, you're going to catch up to them. And
if you see that your opponent tried to follow you, but they failed and they fall in the water, that's also a great moment to strike, because when they're stuck in the water, pre-aquatic update, being stuck in the water is a very, very bad position to be in.
It's not always as bad with a shield, but it's still not a good position to be in. The shield makes it easier, but it's still no good.
The shield gives you a chance, but if you get stuck in water, whether it's flowing water or still water, it's gonna make things a lot tougher for you.
Yeah.
Anything else? Or would you have any type of strafe suggestion for someone who's fighting with the bow? All right.
There's lots of different things that you can do. It's simple. You kind of want to be unpredictable, because if you get in a pattern of doing left and right, a good player will eventually figure out you're going left, right, left, right. And I mean, you can do it with a bow, right? You can go 2 right, 1 left kind of thing, but you don't want to be predictable. So you kind of want to choose whether to stay still, move left, or move right. But you gotta be unpredictable, or else your opponent's gonna figure out what you're doing.
Correct. But speaking of predictable, actually, in terms of bow battles, most of the time, especially with newer players, the odds are your opponent is going to be a little bit predictable. And so when they're shooting, and if they're moving around and they're strafing and they're shooting, they're gonna start moving really slow once they start aiming their bow. So if you see, you can wait for the moment where they're gonna switch to the bow, and that's exactly when you shoot, because that's when they're gonna be stopping their strafe and they're gonna start to shoot, and that's the moment where they're immobile, and that might make them easier for you to shoot in that moment of time.
And a little bit more of a complex thing that is hard to have in your mindset while you're playing is a player that has their bow out is going to shooting with it probably 90% of the time, because the only way you can have a bow and a shield out while shielding is if you swap to it while on your shield. So if you look at me right now, it kind of looks like I'm shielding, it kind of looks like I'm shooting my bow. I am shielding right now, but it doesn't look hugely different from me shooting, right? There's not a huge difference between these two things.
Indeed. I can barely tell the difference.
Yeah. The main thing is most people don't shield and then swap to their bow and then don't go to shoot. Like from what I've seen, at least, if they have a bow out, they probably don't have their shield up. But it's really hard to tell the difference, like visually, between the two.
Yeah.
But in my opinion, most of the time when I see someone with a bow out, they are not having.
They're probably not shielded. Yep.
Yeah.
Now I noticed lava bucket in my hand.
Oh well, that's not really strafing. That's a secondary item.
That's a secondary item. But when I saw that primary item in your hands called the Diamond Axe, and I have, well, it's not even enchanted. All I have is this sword. and I don't have a diamond axe, I see you coming, and I'm like, oh no. Andy has got this diamond axe. He's going to take down my shield, and then he's going to murder my face with extreme prejudice.
Yep.
And there's nothing I can do to stop him. Or is there?
There's a few things you can do.
There's a couple things.
The most reliable is the lava bucket. That's one block. It's a block. You place it right on the body. The body completely ignores your placing of the block. I can place it like relatively close to your feet, and if you're within one of these 4 squares, you'll probably get hit by it, right?
Yeah. Especially if you're coming in for if the opponent is coming in for the melee, and coming in to hit me. Yep. Right here is roughly the place where it's going to be the best spot to try and get them.
Right. Yeah, you want to get as close directly on them as they can, so you don't have more time to react. But if you know where they're going to end up, like if they're jumping down somewhere, or they're coming right at you with their shield down, like especially with the slowdown of the shield, like you kind of know where I'm going to be. It's relatively predictable while I'm holding my shield down. And it makes it so if you want to lava me. Oh, I broke it, didn't I? There you go.
Did you break it? No. It's
okay.
I got it.
Oh, you picked it back up? Okay.
Yeah.
So you'll know where I'm going to be. You can lava me. And I have less reaction time to my water down. But while I'm putting my water down, I don't have my shield up. So you get free hits in. Even if I water immediately and take probably a heart and a half of damage, you'll have free swings in with your sword.
Yep.
So whenever you have no axe and you just have a sword, you always want to have a secondary tool. Now you can always offhand this as like a flint and steel or something like cobwebs, because in 1.9 plus you can get cobwebs just from shearing cobwebs. You don't need silk touch anymore. You just go to a abandoned mine shaft or a stronghold and use shears on them. You'll get cobwebs.
And the good part with the cobwebs is, especially against an opponent with an axe, is that to remove the cobweb quickly, you need the sword.
So if someone's using
if they have the axe, there's a chance they don't even have a sword in their bar, and so they'll be forced to completely shield up and try to slowly maneuver their way out of the cobwebs the hard way. So in that case, your axe wielding opponent is going to be. He's going to be saying some nasty words under his breath.
There's always water as well to clear it up pretty quickly, but if you're placed directly on it, you can't place it on the cobweb, I believe. Oops, there goes my water.
There goes my water. Yeah, you can't place it directly on top of it. So if I'm stuck in the cobweb like this...
Let me show you.
Let me go in deep.
Oh,
all right.
That's an option.
I can't place the water on top of the cobweb. So I have to try and place the water way over there.
Yeah.
And that's how it'll eventually come out. But you see how long it took just because of the one that's too high. I was still stuck in that one.
You can even double it up as well. Yeah. And you can't really place anything anywhere. So.
And a quick note about the flint and steel, by the way, because there's some people who shy away from using the lava bucket, fearing that they might lava themselves, like I just did, you see? And, of course, when you lava yourself, you're using your own weapons against yourself. And that's why the flint and steel might come in handy, because the flint and steel does less damage than the lava bucket, but you're also less likely to damage yourself with it. And you can just liberally spam as you back away, and you're probably going to be safer than with the lava bucket if you're not confident yet.
It does have the same concept where once someone's on fire, they're going to put themselves out, and then you can get free hits in on them anyways because they won't have a shield up. Yeah. But it is a little bit different with the flint and steel because you can use it multiple times. With a lava bucket, you just place it once and you're done. Someone can consistently walk through that fire and take more damage because they take the fire damage and they take the fire tick damage as well. With the lava, they take the lava damage and the fire tick damage, and the lava damage is, I believe, twice the fire damage from the flint and steel fire.
Yep.
So it does a heart and a half typically per tick.
I wanted to mention, while in melee, that this applies to PvE, but zombies can hit you through this, and not only zombies but other players can hit you through this.
That's only if you're looking a specific way, though.
Yeah, only if you're. Only if you're looking. Yeah. You need to be.
Here, you look at me, and I'll show you. So you can't really see their back ever, You can't hit that shield part, but if they're looking at an
right
angle,
there. Yeah.
then they can. It's your arms, I believe, that you can do it.
There you go. So if your arms are through,
yeah,
you can actually it's just easier with the bow actually. But the zombies can hit you. Then that's how. If you're wondering, if a zombie has ever hit you through a corner, that was because your arm was popping through.
That's how they did it. They tickled
and
your
so
arm.
sometimes you might think you're in an area that's safe, but other people are shooting you. They're not cheating. They're shooting you through that little space where they can see your arm pop through. Yeah. Aside from the lava and the cobwebs and the flint and steel, you wanted to mention the rod.
There's a few more secondaries. Let me just go through all the secondaries that you can have while we're on the subject.
Yes.
So if you want to make a little pillar, I'll demonstrate the rod.
Yeah.
So
great.
That's a wall. Yep. Just so in before 1.9, rods would push back in making it so you can get those cool kid combos where you push them further and then you walk up and in that space they can't hit you, but you can hit them. That complicated hooligan stuff.
That no longer works in the combat update. But
that
the rods...
that no longer works. It now hooks onto a target and it pulls them. Now you might be thinking that this is an extremely, efficient in any way, but there's things like
let's imagine that we're in a fight here, and I'm trying to bow Andy from up here. Oh, there you go. I'm no longer on top of the tree. I've been brought down.
And there's another way you can go about using this as well. If you want to run in front of me and just sprint jump, just away from me, you can use it to pull them and interrupt their sprinting.
Oh no! Wow. I'm in a hole. Oh, thank you.
You can also do that. If someone's under you, you can also pull them up, and they.
I just the pulling up from under actually does great damage. Oh, okay. Well, let's cheat then. Let's do it.
Trying to help you out here.
Yeah, actually, the pulling up and down actually we just did do damage indeed. So you can force your opponent to take various forms of fall damage with the rod.
There's a few other things as well you might want to consider having in your inventory in a UHC. Stuff like boats. If you are running away from an enemy, and
you can run much slowly, way slower by using a boat on land. But you might distract them with Andy, of course, means using the boat to make a quick escape in water.
Let's say Flouze, for some reason, was completely messing me up in a PvP encounter, and I was running away from him, and I encounter this. What are the chances that Flouze Maker has a boat on him?
Not very high, actually.
But me, I typically usually carry 1 or 2 boats on me whenever I go out into combat because it makes for a quick escape.
Yeah, Andy, an intellectual, always has a boat.
I always have a boat. There's other things you can also use for getting away in combat, like ender pearls. They're always good to get close to your enemies or running away from enemies. And
watch out, though. Ender pearls usually often have the ender pearl damage on, so they'll do 2 hearts of damage.
Yeah.
So always keep that eye out. In this case here, we don't have absorption on, and we don't have ender pearl on. But by the way, speaking of absorption, I just realized.
All right.
We completely forgot. But there is a concept called when absorption happens, called pre-gapping. It's sometimes used in conjunction with the ender pearl. When the ender pearls do damage, you pre-gap, take the 2 hearts of absorption, ender pearl to your opponent, your unsuspecting opponent, and the 2 hearts of ender pearl damage will be done to the absorption. And so you're in great shape to immediately attack your opponent and just murder their face.
That doesn't actually need to require absorption either. If you're quick enough between your ender pearl and your gapple, you can throw your ender pearl, eat your gapple, and by the time it lands, if it's already 8, you'll have those 2 hearts applying to the ender pearl damage. You might lose like half a heart from it, but if you really there's an ender mite on you, if you really want to avoid being down in a melee encounter, you can actually gapple while the ender pearl is being thrown, and that damage will recover itself during the battle.
Right. By and large, the saddle actually, if you're playing on some place where horses are on, in a UHC, being able to ride a horse in a clear open field is going to be an advantage, both in terms of speed, usually, but also in terms of being able to move while shooting with your bow. Because normally when you're aiming on the bow, you're pretty much static. Hence why it's it's a perfect moment to shoot your opponent while they're pulling on their bow. But if you're on horseback, this does not apply. So that's a lot of the times, a lot of UHC servers will have horses be entirely off for that reason, because it can make a player nearly impossible to catch.
To be fair, it does technically kind of slow you down, because while you're aiming, you go left to right on a horse as opposed to straight and back.
Right. I mean, it slows you down a little bit, but really not as much.
It's like, it's not to scale as the difference between running and holding down your bow. It's not to the same scale at all.
Yeah. And of course, the milk bucket is, of course, if you know the nether is open for exploration, and you know splash potions are on, then it's a fair guess that someone might bring poison potions to the table, and you'll want the milk bucket. You'll definitely want the milk bucket.
Really good against shields, because if you can place it right behind them, and it will get full splash damage typically. The thing is, with poison is if you get not even tier 2 is annoying, but the tier 1 extended is what really gets you, because that can last for 1 minute and 30 seconds. I think it does the full damage in about 30 seconds, getting you to half a heart from full.
And you can't heal for like,
healing is a waste, because if you use a gap, it's going to get deleted right away. You have to wait that full minute, 30 seconds if you get a full hit. With a milk bucket, you just kind of erase it. Sure, if you have pots, it kind of gets rid of your potion effects, but what's better, 1 strength pot or 8 hearts of healing?
The 8 hearts of healing is much better.
Typically, the 8 in a UHC, especially when you're not extremely great. I'll use it for lack of a greater term. Great at the game. You're not going to have 20 gaps on you. You're going to have just a few.
yeah. Usually, gaps are rare to find. Well, I mean, most of the time. Also, of course, the milk bucket is not just useful against players. So even if the nether is off, having a milk bucket, if you can have it, might save your life against a witch. That can happen to pop on the surface at any moment, or maybe poison spiders and so on. So, you might want to have some of that aboard. Another tip, perhaps. Oh, there's one final. There's one more thing before the final tip. We're healing. We're fighting, and we're bow fighting. And Andy knows that I'm shooting him with the bow, and he wants to heal because he wants to live at some point. He needs to take that time to eat a gapple. But unfortunately, he knows that if he takes the gapple out, he can no longer shield while he's eating the gapple, and then I'd be able to shoot him. What's the strategy for that? Well, it's going to be building a little wall. Building a little wall and doing it quickly is actually key to his survival, so that now I can't shoot him anymore, and he can heal up safely. And by the time I've made my way around the wall, he can potentially make another flank to the wall, provided you're fast enough. There's a lot of players or viewers that might be a little slow in terms of building a wall because they're used to making nice houses or something. When it comes to making a wall to defend yourself in a UHC, because the shield is not going to be an option for a little second, it's going to be a little difficult to pick it up. You might want to practice it a couple times. Look down in a 45-degree angle, place your first block, and then jump. And quickly place the other two. So it's gonna take a little bit of practice, but it might save your life. Blocks can be lifesavers.
You always want to typically have about like 2 stacks at minimum of blocks, because running out of blocks, running out of arrows, running out of charges on your shield durability, it puts you at a disadvantage over someone that still has those tools with them. So.
Mm-hmm. And the other thing I wanted to mention is we were talking about a lot of secondary items, but a lot of the times you've just fought a hard-fought battle, and you've barely managed to defeat your opponent, and now you have their stuff on the ground, and you've just won, but you're low health, of course, and you want their loot, you want the stuff, but unfortunately, UHCs are hectic affairs, and you probably don't have 5 minutes to lounge around and make a chest and dump all their stuff in the chest and then carefully look at everything. So a lot of the times it's actually going to be a good idea before you go to combat to actually empty out your inventory.
Yeah, and, resource inventory management is huge in a game mode like UHC, seeing as you don't want to sit around once everything gets started, because if you sit around, you'll be behind any other people. Like dynamics like snowballing get put in the game, where if someone has 5 kills, you're assuming if they're full health, they have a lot of stuff because they have the inventories of 5, the best parts of an inventory of 5 different people in their inventory.
Yep.
You want to have everything that's like, I don't need this string, I don't need this piece of coal. What are you gonna need a piece of coal for? Huh?
You're done. You're done smelting. You're done smelting. Smelting is over.
You're gonna want absolutely everything that you think can benefit you in a fight, as well as some wood in case you make a crafting table. You can even craft those crafting tables ahead of time, having them in your inventory, making it so you don't have to waste any more time later.
Mm-hmm.
You don't need a pickaxe on your bar, because what are you gonna do? You're gonna go caving at meetup?
Yeah.
You might need to break into someone's wall. That's where things like knowing where things in your inventory come into play,
yeah.
because you want to have that pickaxe in a place where you can get to, but you don't really need it on your bar.
No, you don't. And otherwise, the other thing, anything else that's expendable, you'll want to remove from your inventory, because that way, when your opponent quickly dies and you're in the middle of a battle and it's hectic and you need to like get out of dodge as fast as you can so you can survive, then the empty slots in your inventory will automatically be filled with some of your opponent's loot, and you might be able to escape the field of battle and or wall up quickly around the loot and be able to pick up more stuff more quickly, and then get out and heal and survive. But if you're in a situation where your inventory, if you go to battle and your inventory is already filled with stuff, unless it's potions, you're probably going to want to get rid of almost all of it. Otherwise, you're going to have a really hard time dividing the spoils of war.
Well, there's always stuff, and there's stuff you need to keep in mind. Like if someone asked you, well, where do you put your blocks on your bar? You should be able to answer that if you really do want to do well in these games. I put my blocks on 8, just so I always keep them on 8, so I always know I have to somehow get to my 8th slot if I want to place down blocks. I put my main weapon on 1, my bow on 2, my healing on 7, my water bucket on 9, stuff like that. I have that set up so that's what I do every single time I need to use one of those tools, is I have that specific item in that specific slot, so I know that's what I need to do.
Which brings the topic of hotkeys.
Yeah.
And I don't have a lot of hotkeys. I only have 2, which are buttons on the mouse, and so I can switch easily between my melee weapon and my bucket, and from that I can scroll to other things. But that's scrolling is typically going to be slower. The more hotkeys you can have, the more you're going to be able to switch to the tools that you need the most at the moment. The reason why the water bucket is there is because being able to water bucket drop is actually going to be a skill that's going to help you in PvP. For example, if we were fighting on top of trees, for example, and I shoot Andy off, for example, right here, he would have taken fall damage if he had not been able to catch himself with the water bucket. And so landing that water bucket is only possible if he's hotkeyed it, really, because there's not enough time to scroll all the way to the water bucket and land in time.
So yeah, if you want to shoot me again, I'll not water bucket. You can see the difference in damage just from like 8 blocks. So yeah,
that's
I did
2.5
a heart and a half
there.
before, and now I'm down to 4. I'm down by 4. The difference is like 2.5 hearts of damage just from those 8 blocks.
Now, one of the best things a player that lacks skill can do is acquire an important melee advantage with these little guys. You take as many bones as you can find from skeleton spawners or hunting skeletons even. You use your shield, of course, to not get hit. And you tame as many wolves as you can get. You use rotten flesh or meat and build up a nice little pack. And they can be quite an advantage in melee, provided you're able to land one hit. Now, if we have only 2 dogs, like I do right now, it's not going to be the kind of advantage that Andy can't overcome. But if the moment he boops me, he has to keep his shield up at all times, and he is able to fend off the 2 dogs, but it's very difficult. Now imagine if I was here and shooting him at the same time. He'd still, like, even to get rid of just 2 wolves, he'd still be at a certain disadvantage. But now that they're gone, and I have to actually defend myself using my own skill, I'd be in trouble.
Yeah, the thing with wolves is they're more of a distraction that have a certain fight or flight vibe to them. So if they have just 2 wolves, obviously it's not a huge advantage. It's more of a temporary distraction. But let's say Flouze had 10, 15, 20 wolves. That's a bit bigger of a distraction, and it may cause difficulty to fight against if you don't have any wolves or any other melee advantages of yourself. So if Flouze gets his pack of wolves and we try fighting again, I might not want to take that melee fight. Even if I do have the skill advantage over Flouze, he has kind of a mechanical advantage. Yeah. So if I hit Flouze again here,
look at this insanity.
I am letting go of my shield maybe for half a second. My shield is halfway broken. Flouze can get hits off on me. I'm at half health. I'm fighting 4 dogs right now, and I'm letting my shield down just for half a second. I'm almost dead.
Yeah, the others are stuck in the pool over here. Are they? Yep, they're all stuck in the pool.
Just by walking over here. So the best way to get away from these guys is stuff like water or falling down a hole, because it loses their AI tracking if you go enough distance.
Yeah, let's actually demonstrate the AI losing the tracking there with enough distance. Now, you remember earlier we mentioned having a boat in your inventory? So there's a boat right over there. If Andy gets to the boat and he manages to go far enough away, well, there you go. They're already all pacified. Yeah. They just completely lost interest. And from there, we could decide to resume from the other side of the lake there. We could resume a bow battle. But in a bow battle, the wolves only become like cannon fodder, I guess, like potential shields that they get shot instead of me. That's it.
It's like having a block down in front of you, except it's a living breathing pup. So if that's not an option, running away, not your style. You're more of a fighter than a flighter.
Right.
The lava bucket's a good tool to get a bunch of them down quickly. I don't know if we need them for any other reason, Flouze. So can I?
No, I think we can. You can dispatch of what we have here.
All right, and just for reference, I have 7 durability left on that shield I was just using.
Yeah. They'll all those attacks on the shield will end up like eating it completely.
So let me boop you again.
Oh, okay. I was gonna trade shields, because now you can only. You have 7 tries to stop them.
So their AI doesn't really go through the lava all that well.
No, they're actually only 2 survived for now. Nope, 1 ran back into the lava, and only 1 remains.
There you go.
And he's not.
Hit me once. Hit me twice. I'm an F5, so it's difficult.
Why were you F5ing?
Cinematic purposes.
I see. Of course. Yeah, I'm the one recording. Remember. But those are the wolves. So the wolves can be a substantial advantage, just like a strength potion would be in melee. But if you're the person who is defending against that, what you want to do is try to keep this battle probably as a bow fight. And if melee is unavoidable, that's the perfect time to take out the lava bucket and get rid of the pack. Because as you saw, they're not very good at avoiding the lava. They don't have the brains of a player. and sidestep the thing. They're not good at that.
It goes back to the whole fight or flight thing, or putting yourself in an advantage over your enemy if you know what they have. If they have something like strength potions, they're going to have a melee advantage. A pack of wolves, they're going to have a melee advantage. If you know they have a sharp 5 diamond axe because they named it Mjolnir or something, then they're going to have a melee advantage. So you want to push that to a bow fight. It's the same concept with bow as well. If you know someone has a really good bow or like a flame bow or something, you're going to want to push melee because flame bows are pretty obnoxious. You're going to want to sword fight them. So that's kind of wolves / weapon advantages.
Yep. I think we've covered just about everything that's relevant to the 1.9 to 1.12, the combat update. And I think we've been able to show that there's a lot of different things that you can possibly do. A lot of these things are skill-based, but that you don't necessarily need too much practice to get really good at them. I think the one that needs the most practice specifically to get really good at is the bow. Right. But most of the other ones, you can do a little bit of practice and start picking up the technique relatively quickly. It took me about, actually, like, to be honest, it took me a year to actually start being able to get the timing right for water buckets. It's humiliating to admit, but I'm an old dog, and old dog learns, they learn tricks a little slower than everyone else. But once you are able to master these tricks, or at least be able to use them a little bit, you start being more and more of a threat when it comes to a UHC PvP.
Well, and a lot of those things to do with UHC PvP, it's very case specific. And if for any viewers that think that, oh, I know all these things, there's a lot of things that you might not know, like shield hopping and certain ways of bow spamming and strafing as a bow spamming, like circle strafing as well with a sword. Because the shield doesn't protect you all.
The shield only protects the front, so being able to, that's the increased mobility. Yeah, there you go. The increased mobility that we were talking about is where the advantage lies, because now I need to try and follow with this shield where Andy's going, and you see, the moment I lose track of him, that's when he can get a shot in. If you were wondering, he mentioned it just now, the what do you call it, the shield hopping. Which would be a technique if, for example, he doesn't have a bow, but I do, and I'm just trying to maximum. Oh, I'm out of arrows. That's embarrassing. I was gonna try and bow spam, and I'm like, I can't bow spam with anything. So as you can see, he doesn't have a bow, and I can try to bow spam as much as I can, and I'm gonna hit him a few times, so that does do damage. But he managed to come into melee range and then finally hit me with the axe. And that's through shield hopping. So what happens if I shield and try to approach, I'm going to be really, really slow. And Andy's going to see that, and he's going to take out his lava bucket, and he's going to lava my ass. Pardon my French there, but that's essentially what's going to happen. So if I want to be able to approach him, the technique is going to have to be shield hopping. And so the principle is simply that you run, or you start to run and hop, and if you start shielding while you're in the air, in the jump, you're not going to lose as much momentum. So the approach is that you're going to be like partially shielding. You're going to sometimes be forced to lower your shield, obviously, because you want to make some progress, but you're going to be able to approach your opponent and be able to catch up to this bowman and be able to melee them.
It also gives you more mobility because with Minecraft mechanics, you have air mobility, which makes it so you can go, like, if you ever played the dropper, that whole concept of that map is you're using your air mobility to move certain direction in the air. That still applies at this short distance where you have some air mobility, you can move around in the air. If someone is trying to lava you while you're shield hopping, if you want to try to do it to me, I'll probably
I don't have the lava bucket anymore.
There's your lava bucket.
You're going to have to help me
There's
out.
the difference between me just walking up to you and you very easily being able to lava me, and me having this mobility, like, you can hit me, but you see it didn't even burn me. You'll eventually hit me, but I'll be hitting you by that point. So it's just a bit more advanced mobility that makes it so you have more of a chance against people that are bow spamming you. Because half the time you'll have your shield up.
Exactly. It's not perfect. But we're going to say hello to Brodator and goodbye to Brodator. Thank you very much for watching. And make sure you check out Andy on Twitch. He just hit affiliate. The link is going to be in the description down below. Make sure you don't mix his next stream. He doesn't only stream Minecraft. Also a variety of other games.
Primarily, I stream Pokemon right now. Hardcore Nuzlocke runs. I also stream Blizzard games like Overwatch and World of Warcraft, and the occasional Minecraft UHC.
From time to time. From time to time. So check out his streams. Make sure you follow on Twitch. And thank you very much for watching. If you have questions or anything, things that maybe we haven't explained clearly enough, well, drop that in the comments, because we'll definitely try and help. We'll try and help. But hopefully this video helps either players who are new to the combat updates or new to PvP in the combat updates, just period. Hopefully we're giving you a few tips that you're not going to feel so defenseless, or at least have an idea of what you should be practicing when your next UHC is scheduled. Thank you very much for watching. Go follow Andyboyonalert on Twitch, and see you in the next video. Bye-bye.
Bye!
Sponsored by the Flouze crew on Patreon.